All right, guys, welcome back to Drop Dice. This is Chris again. If you are checking my channel out for the first time, thank you and welcome. This week we're going to be talking about RPG world building. Now, if I happen to be the first person that you've come across in your search of how to build an RPG world, I definitely strongly recommend that you check out other people's YouTube channels, blogs about the topic, or any sort of articles that you can find, because honestly, it's kind of like going to college about a subject. You have to find the professor with the right teaching style for your learning methods. What I'm going to teach you may not work for you, or at least some of it does, and some of it just doesn't work for you. I'm not going to be hurt if that's the case. I do appreciate anybody who sticks around and kind of learns what I've got to say. If you want some suggestions from me, I would definitely recommend SR2 Joker. He and I agree on a lot of metaphysical things. If you get a chance, check out his world building metaphysics physics series. It's actually very excellent. He's probably a little more detailed than I'm going to be, but I definitely recommend him. A Fistful of Dice, Tabletop Gaming with Juice. Pretty much everybody from the RPG Brigade on YouTube has a video about it, and I would definitely check it out. As far as blogs, I love Gnome Stew. They're a great blog just for anything to do with GMing, so make sure you check them out. How I approach world building is I look at it the way that I paint. For those of you who don't know, I have an artistic background. That's what I have a degree in currently. And if you look on my wall over here, that's one of my paintings. That was a 5-foot by 5-foot canvas. Now, the reason I bring that up is when you unpackage this huge monstrosity, you have this obscene surface of white that has no details on it. And you get struck with what's called blank canvas syndrome. Essentially, you have so many options available to you at that moment in time that it kind of locks you up. Essentially, what you learn in taking an art class is that you shouldn't have a white canvas, honestly. You should do what's called toning. Essentially, you put down paint and you put down paint and you get the paper to a workable condition, because when the paper is white and pristine, you have this fear of messing up. That's how your world building experience will be at first, is you'll have this fear that what you may do may be daunting or could mess up, and that's totally fine. Honestly, that's how you learn to become better. So if you do build something inside the world at the beginning stages, like let's say you want to have a world where reincarnation happens, and you get along to building the game and you go, this reincarnation thing isn't working. Totally fine, get rid of it. Just paint over it, do something different. Now, with this painting analogy, one of the things that you learn is that there are hundreds of millions of tools out there. I spoke about different YouTube videos, things here on the internet. Those are your tools. Make sure that you have a lot of tools and techniques in your tool belt. So like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, please, please, please check out other people's works, because that will only help you improve. The things I'm going to talk to you about, those are my tips and tools, and hopefully they help you out here. Now, my first one, tip number one, is going to be don't do it alone. Now, this one kind of sounds weird. A lot of GMs do kind of prep on their own, but it's not 100% on their own. If you talk to any experienced DM, when they craft a world, sure, they come in with this great idea that they have, like, let's say, of the reincarnation thing. Let's say you want to do a game where it really explores this concept of reincarnation. So you start building a world and a society that's based around it. Well, if you have a player who says, hey, reincarnation's really cool, but I would like to explore maybe the possibility of like a reincarnation based upon works that you did in life, that's not going at it alone, because you can take in that player's input and go, you know what, that's cool, I didn't think about that. And honestly, collaborating with your players, other GMs online, is going to help you see aspects that you may have forgotten. It's really good to do it through the whole process, not at the end, because if you do it at the end, you kind of feel like somebody is kind of bashing on your baby a little, is kind of the best way I could put it. So definitely keep that communication channel open with at least your players. Now, if you don't want to share it online, totally fine. Not everybody is ready to do that sort of thing, and that's cool. I mean, do what you're comfortable with. Now, another thing that I want to kind of talk to you guys about is going back to that toning idea. What I want you to do is think of a subject that you really want to explore. Now, for my example, I used previously reincarnation. That was just something that popped in my head. But for the world that I'm going to build with you guys, I want to explore one major thing. I was building a world with my normal group of players, and they had this idea that they didn't want to be on a central Earth. They want, well, planet, whatever you want to call it. They wanted to be on a moon. And the idea was is that because they were on a moon, the planet would actually revolve around the moon, and this planet would also have another moon. So if you've ever seen Escaflowne, the idea of the mystic moon, that's where my head goes with it. Now, they have this really cool idea. I'm not super strong in astronomy, so one of my players had to kind of teach me this. If you have a kind of egg-shaped or slightly egg-shaped planet, you start to get kind of weird things going on. Different seasons. It can actually explain why that there's a tundra right next to a swamp or something like that. And so I loved this idea of having this kind of egg-shaped planet that I could pretty much explore anything I really want to on there. And one of the things that I really loved about it is I told them, I said, you know, I really want to have a planet where we don't have seasons like we understand it here on Earth, like a spring, fall, summer, and winter, all that stuff. I want to kind of ignore that. I want to have basically what you get in a lot of island cultures, a wet season and a dry season, but I want to knock that up to 11. So what I wanted to do was I want to have a flood season and a dry season. Essentially, the world will have two maps, actually. One is going to be the peak of flood season, where a lot of the world is actually underwater, including some of the civilizations and cities. And then there's the low season, or the dry season, if you will, where the water's going to recede, and all those cities that used to be on the water line of the flood season are now up in the mountains with these docks that just kind of stick out of nowhere. I don't know why I really love the idea of this irregular seasons and a moon instead of a planet. And my players, they still wanted it to be kind of a D&D-esque adventure, but it was definitely going to have a different feel. So that leads me to another point here. You want to go ahead and pick your system and pick your style of play. I know my guys personally happen to be kind of more of a beer and pretzels type group, so I'm going to do a little bit more than I usually do with those guys, because honestly, this video series is about teaching you everything that I can think of about world building. So some of this stuff I don't use all the time either. So don't take 100% everything that I do to heart. Now, the style of play. For online purposes, because I'll probably end up using this for the one-shot group on Facebook eventually, what I would do is I would look at a style of heroics. A lot of people seem to be doing kind of these gritty games, and I love gritty, I love sci-fi, I love horror. If you have Cthulhu coming out of like somebody's boot in a campaign, I think it's a great campaign. But I don't really want to mold right into that. So basically, I kind of want to carve out my own place. So what I'm thinking is a high heroic style game. Like, we've already got this idea of tides shifting, so maybe like a swashbuckler high adventure type feel. That's totally up to the players and what they're interested in, but it does give me kind of a thought process of, okay, if the tides are going to be important, maybe we're going to have seafaring folk, and maybe we could go Vikings, or we could go swashbuckling, or we could go like an Oriental theme where, yeah, there's a lot of boats, but they're mainly fishermen, and then there's these pirates and stuff that are out there. And Oriental pirates are very different than Golden Age of piracy pirates, which is what you see on Pirates of the Caribbean. So if you're interested in that subject, I definitely recommend researching that to figure out what kind of thing that you're looking for. Really, with any subject, research is always fundamental. So with this idea of research, the other thing that we need to do is gather up some source material. Now, when I say source material, of course that means the game books, because the game books are going to be 100% where you start. But again, going back to art, I love pictures. One of the things that I do is I troll Facebook, or excuse me, Google, for about a week or two before I even start to present an idea to a group, because I want to have a lot of pictures inside my folder of game ideas. so that I can look through there and go, let's see, I've got a picture of a river valley with this castle, and it's got some birds, and it's very green and lush, and I'm like, that's okay. That's kind of your traditional D&D look, but it's got kind of a majestic quality. That's cool. I'll save that. And then let's say I find a picture that looks like the one that I used for the thumbnail this time. It's got these weird jagged rock spires, and you see this planet, and there's like a moon out there, and you're definitely on some sort of alien world, and I think, bam, that's perfect for this concept. And then I find another picture that it's kind of a dragon-looking thing, but it's got like eyes all down the side of its head. It's got these huge bat wings and a spear-like tail, and I'm like, oh, that's really cool. That's something to go in that folder. Definitely keep those things around, because when we get to it, we're going to talk about reskinning. Essentially, the basics of it is what you see statistically in the book is not necessarily what you have to give the players. This dragon I'm talking about, let's say I really love statistically what the copper dragon can do, but I have this image and I have this idea of like this visceral evil copper dragon feeling character. I don't have to tell my players that it's a copper dragon. I just describe what the dragon looks like, and they have to maneuver around it. And yeah, I can use the abilities from the book, and maybe somebody will eventually meta and figure out that I'm just using copper dragon stats, but they're totally going to approach it differently than if I just say, hey, you guys are fighting a copper dragon. Always, always, always describe things. Don't just tell them what they see. Like, actually show them what they see is kind of the best way to put that. And we'll kind of talk about that in another series. And then lastly, what I'd like to talk to you guys about for this video is build sliders. The idea is essentially you come up with a dichotomy, and you say, okay, for SR2 Joker, he's got this dichotomy of technology versus man's intellect. I think that's a really strong example of it. So on one side, you have this idea of technology is basically man using bits of his environment, his ingenuity, and his capability to his advantage to beat the overall environment. And then you have this idea of uncivilized man, if you will, who hasn't quite made it there. He's not quite as intelligent. So now you have this intelligence slider for the world, and you can kind of shift that around. And now this doesn't have to be universal. Like, let's say, you take the stats and you go, okay, because it's a D&D world, I want Dragonborn to have their own civilization. They're going to be 16th century age of piracy, like nonsense eye patch wearing pirates, because dragons on the high seas, why not? Well, maybe those guys have a higher intellect, because generally shipbuilding in this world is going to be hugely important, because there are parts of the world where that's the only way to get around during half the year, and then the other half of the year, once the tides recede, you now have open trade routes. People go into these lands that have receded from water, which, by the way, my planet is entirely freshwater. So once those waters recede, all the land that was covered by the water is now fertile and ripe for crops. So a lot of farmers are seasonal farmers that move back and forth, and they build houses that are meant to be flooded. All of these things are kind of aspects of it. So definitely that's something you have to think about. And I say sliders with a dichotomy, but sometimes sliders affect other sliders. Like my environment slider that says, okay, my environment is going to be very harsh over here, real close to the edge of like not being able to support life, death, planet kind of feel. Because of that, my technology slider is going to have to move unless I really want to really start game. And that's totally a preference thing. If you want to go that way, you absolutely can, and that's where it goes back to style of play. These are just kind of the openers for the series. Please be sure to check it out as I move along. Next time, I will actually talk to you guys a little bit about cartography and how that's going to affect the world. I'll have a map demo and a link to somebody who I think does a lot better demonstration of how to draw a map in Photoshop than I have. If you happen to have GIMP or you don't have Photoshop, I would recommend getting GIMP. That way you're ready for next time we talk. Basically, this is going to be an every Wednesday thing, and then I'll see you again on Saturdays for Community Saturday, where I'll talk about whatever seems to be kind of the hot topic in the community or I found interesting for the week. All right, guys, thanks for checking out my channel. Please like, comment, subscribe, or share to your friends. This is Chris with Drop Dice, and I'll see you at the table.